to episode 360 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Jessica Carr
and Emily Kubin-Kanik.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1, and in part 2, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1934's It Happened One Night. And we're going to dispel all the Hollywood myths, like, is Clark Gable the inspiration for Bugs Bunny? I don't know. This episode brought to you by Space Jam 2, A New Legacy.
Oh, why'd you do that?
I don't know. Head over to cinematary.com. We got some new reviews. If you've been watching Netflix, you probably have watched Bo Burnham's Inside. We have a review of that. We also have a review of new release All Light Everywhere by Theo Anthony. And then we have a review by Miss Jessica Carr of Pig by Michael Sarnowski, which, Jessica, tell us a little bit about that movie and then direct people to the website.
That's right. So Pig is Michael Sarnowski's first feature. He also did a short about a woman who gets killed by a clown. So that was like weird research that I did before I watched this movie. But Neon gave me a screener for this, which was very cool. Like, when I saw the trailer for it, I was like, okay, you're telling me that Nicolas Cage is a man who lives in the wilderness and he has a truffle pig and they spend all their time together and they love each other. Like, I'm sold. And then the rest of the trailer was like, okay, someone steals his pig from him. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I have to figure out what happens. And I think it's really interesting because the trailer of the movie, like, I think the marketing really wants to make it look like it's another one of those, like, John Wick movies where it's like this guy's precious, like, animal gets stolen from him and now he's, like, gonna take revenge. And it like has some thematic like elements in common with John Wick, but it like that's not really what the movie is like trying to do. It's not really an action film. I think it's cool because like when you're watching it, you kind of expect for it to kind of twist in the middle of the film where you're like, okay, he's about to start kicking some ass, and the movie like kind of wants to do something else. So you find out that Nicolas Cage's character is a former chef in Portland, and he has this huge reputation for his cooking, and he's like renowned like everywhere, but for some reason he leaves that behind and retreats into the woods with his pig and just lives his life out there until they steal his pig, and so he has to go back into Portland and find all of these people that he had old connections with so that he can figure out who stole his pig.
They cooked them to death. And then he cooks them to death.
Doesn't cook
Instead
them
of
to
John
death.
Wick killing them with like guns, he like cooks them and he's like, "You're a souffle now."
No. But that is like actually, so like I talk a lot. My review is spoiler free, so if you want to watch the movie, then you can definitely read the entire thing. I wanted to make sure that people could like go and watch the movie. But it's like there are lots of foodie type of moments in the movie. Like they show him making like a handmade mushroom tart whenever he is in the cabin alone by himself, and the way that they shoot the food is kind of like the opposite of food porn. The camera is like out of focus from it, and you're very distant from like the actual process of them making the food. And it was like kind of weird. Like it was weird that was the approach they took to it, but it kind of shows that it doesn't really mean the same to him that it used to. And the movie kind of delves into why, and it's a really like good film about grief and how you can have connections to these things, but whenever the people that are connecting you to them are gone, like how do you still love them the same? And it's a really, really good movie. I don't think that people are going to be expecting like what it ends up doing, and perhaps they will be disappointed if they're looking for like a John Wick action type of movie, but I really liked it. So my review is up on Cinematary right now. You can check that out. And then I think that Pig is going to be shown in theaters. I think that they're distributing it to different theaters.
Okay.
So
it's not going to be like a VOD thing?
I don't think so. I got an email from the Belcourt that they were showing it, and that's in Nashville, but I don't know. So, like, maybe some, like, art house theaters are going to get it.
Nice. Well, yeah. So if you would like to watch Nicolas Cage find his truffle pig, read about it. Well, first, read about it from Jessica's review, and then go check it out this weekend. Nice. But you also caught a pair of other new releases, which are now on Netflix.
Yeah, so Andrew talked about this last week, but he saw the first Fear Street movie, and it's Fear Street Part 1, 1994. I watched that one, and I also watched Fear Street Part 2, 1978. So they're doing it in a series of 3 on Netflix that they're releasing. The first 2 are already out, and I think the last one is out on Friday. And have you seen like why the reason is like they're starting in 1994 and like going back? Yeah, so it has to do with what is going on in the plot of the film. So the teenagers that are in the movie, they live in this place called Shadyside, and like people just keep turning into killers and just massacring like people in the town, and there's no explanation. Everyone keeps saying like these people are having psychotic breaks. But the movie like kind of gets into like, okay, there's a history of this happening in this town, and it's happening for a reason. And they're saying that it's because there's this witch who is like possessing people. I don't think that that's a spoiler. I think that you like figured that out. Hopefully.
I feel like most things have a witch possessing things. So
yeah, hopefully that's not a spoiler, but maybe it was, so my bad for people, but I don't know. So you figure out that the movies are like going back in time, and 1666, which is the last one that's coming out, is the time period where the witch was like, she existed or whatever, and then she gets like hanged, and they like tell the whole story of that and why the curse is a thing. So like I like the first 2, and I like the concept as a whole, and I liked the first 2, but I wasn't in love with them. And I think that Andrew kind of talked about this in the last episode when he talked about the first part, but they have like a very Netflix original-y type of feel to them. The way that they look, like a lot of it, like the first one, everyone is going to compare to Stranger Things because it's like a group of teenagers who are trying to solve this thing, and they keep doing like throwbacks to like all these 90s songs, and they're all these what's it called? Not mic drop. What's the thing where
needle drop?
Yes, needle drop. That's right.
I saw the crazy one. Somebody was sharing on Twitter the one from the first movie where it's like 3 different needle drops in like 45 seconds.
Yeah, they do that. I mean, they still kind of do that in the second one too.
Really?
Where
That's
it
crazy.
reminded me of, they don't do it like 3 times in a row, I don't think, but it reminds me of Stranger Things because they want you to be like, okay, this is the time period we're in. Isn't it so cool how retro it is? And I think that she is doing the same thing, and it turns out that the director is actually married to one of the Duffer brothers who made Stranger Things. So there's that like weird scoop, and when I heard that, it wasn't
Scoop? Did nobody else know it?
breaking news.
Breaking news.
I'm sure people figured it out, but like it made a lot of sense to me because of like this. Even the second one, they're like in a camp, so they're trying to do like a camp horror movie, and there are still parts of it that feel like Stranger Things to me, with the way that it is like shot and the way that it looks and like the whole feel of it, which I liked Stranger Things like the first couple of seasons, so there's not really anything wrong with that, but like that part of it was kind of weird, and I don't think that they look particularly good. The last one looks really good, and so hopefully they kind of break the mold with what they did in the first 2. But like I thought that the first one, the cast of characters, it has a lesbian romance in it, and I thought that the characters were much more bonded and we got to know them. And then, like Andrew said, when they're kind of like hacked into bits, it's like very emotional. And I'm fine with that in a horror movie. I'm fine if we're like, if we like get to know the characters and then they get like murdered. Like I don't
like
think
you
it's
get
like,
to know them before they're hacked into pieces.
I mean, yeah, well, I mean, like a lot of slasher movies, like don't want you to do that. Like, they want you to be distant, and they're like Andrew said, like these are just a bunch of, you know, like meat puppets just getting like hacked up or whatever, and it's fine and fun. And I think the second one is like that. Like, I think the second one approaches the movie like that. So it could be interesting in that she's approaching the movies with different horror styles and different ways to approach like the characters and the story, because the second one focuses on two sisters that like hate each other, and there is a part in the movie that is supposed to be emotionally compelling, but it didn't land for me at all because everybody in the second movie, they're so mean to each other. They're like they spray paint this girl's cabin and they call her a bitch, and they're like, we hope you burn and die in hell, and like they're just like, everybody is so mean to each other in the second one. And I'm like I never went to camp, so I'm like, were people really this mean to each other at camp? Because
I also got hacked to pieces in camp, so you know.
So like these people get, you know, chopped up by an axe murderer, and I'm like, it's fine because they all sucked, and I just didn't like, I was just like, okay, everybody is mean to each other, everybody sucks, so I guess it's fine. But like, in that regard, I liked the first one a tiny bit more than I liked the second one, because I liked the compelling story with the characters and being invested in it. And then in the second one, it was kind of just like, stylistically, I thought that it was cooler because it was like a camp slasher film. But on the other side, I did not think that it was as like emotionally compelling. Yeah. So I'm really interested to see what they do in the third one. It looks like they're actually recasting like all of the characters that used in the first two to play people in the different time period. So that to me is like an interesting choice, because it's all faces that we've already seen before, but they're playing different characters. So yeah, I'm interested to see like where it goes, and I like that they split it up into 3 parts, and even though they're movies, it feels like a series, like it's something that you're able to like watch and then you look forward to watching the next one. And I wonder if that will like make other directors want to do something similar to that.
Yeah, like instead of you know, the thing I think with the Stranger Things comparison is like they always talk about how they're like, it's not 10 episodes, it's a 10-hour movie, or you know, something stupid like that. And rather than just doing that, why don't you just make, you know, 3 different movies that, you know, rather than trying to fit a whole story into 10 episodes, you can just make like a hour and a half, 2-hour movie. Yeah. No, that's cool. I mean, I would be more into that than listening to guys named the Duffer Brothers talking about 10-hour movies. So I'm in for it. Or whatever this director's name, her husband, talking about 10-hour movies, because Scoop.
Because it's the Scoop. Yeah, Leah. Her name is Leah Janiak. If I said that right, I do not know.
Nice. Well, both of those are on Netflix, and like Jessica said, I guess the third one will be up on Netflix by the time this episode launches. So there you go. Jessica, what did you do in between those movies, by the way?
Okay, so this is dumb. This is dumb because if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, I like horror movies. I've gone to horror film festivals.
We see you as like a really tough person. So I mean, this is breaking all of our image.
You know, I like horror movies. I wrote the review for Raw for Cinematary. Like I'm cool. I know about scary movies. It's fine. But I cannot go to sleep if I watch a horror movie. Like I can't go to sleep immediately because my brain is thinking about all these people getting chopped up and all this blood and guts and stuff. And I don't want my brain to have that at the forefront when I'm trying to go to Sleepy Town. So what I do is I watch a kid's movie that I know will make me feel better. And after I watched the first Fear Street movie, I watched Kung Fu Panda. I watched half of it, and then I went to sleep. And then I watched the second Fear Street movie, and then I watched the other half of Kung Fu Panda. And my review of Kung Fu Panda is that it still slaps and is very good. And Jack Black is great as a little chubby panda who learns to love himself and to do kung fu. So, there you go.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect transition to another movie that features animals doing martial arts to a degree. There's monkeys that do martial arts. I don't know. So I just watched recently Raya and the Last Dragon, which is directed by Don Hall and Carlos Lopez Estrada, who did I think Don Hall did the recent Winnie the Pooh movie for Disney, and the two of them did that. What's the Big Hero 6? Big Hero 6, yeah. And this one, it came out, I think. I can't remember if it was delayed or if it was supposed to come out this year, but anyway, it came out earlier this year on Disney Plus, and stars Kelly Marie Tran from Star Wars, Awkwafina, Daniel Day Kim, Benedict Wong, Patty Harrison from I Think You Should Leave. I just want to point that out. But this one, it takes place in this fantasy world where, before humans and dragons lived together in harmony, but then the humans decided to suck. And so because the humans sucked, the dragons had to save them and sacrifice themselves. And so there's no more dragons except for one that, might be lost or whatever. Cue the Last Dragon. So then 500 years later, you got Raya, and she's trying to bring all the different tribes together. You have everybody was all kumbaya, and then they became assholes, and so then the dragon thing happened, and everybody got separated. And so her dad is is kind of like that camp counselor who's just like, everybody get along. Let's all have a dinner and get along. So he tries to do that. Doesn't go well. And they break this I don't know, some stupid stone thing, and all the bad things that were vanquished when the dragons disappeared come back and turn people into stone. And so then they all become these stone people with their hands like this. This is good audio. They got their hands like this, and so her dad turns the stone. And so, because it's a Disney movie, and in a Disney movie, you cannot have any story happen and any growth happen without either taking a parent out or just killing them. So, because that's how growth happens in life. And so then Raya is on a quest. She's I'm going to find the last dragon. And she does. The dragon is, what is it? Sisu? And it's voiced by Awkwafina, and they team up to get all the little stone pieces together and pop them together, and everybody's sometimes we just got to get along, and we just got to recognize that we're just different people, and all this other whatever, just crap, just kumbaya shit. So. This is in Disney Animation Studios. It's fine. I saw Michael wrote in his review on Letterboxd that he really thought this was probably the best iteration of the post Tangled John Lasseter kind of influence of Disney, so Tangled and Frozen, those things, and it is really kind of impressive in that regard. It has a lot of it, like, in terms of like how they design the dragons and things like that. It is really impressive, but it also kind of, to me, just has like this video game cutscene feeling to it. It also, like, the characters themselves remind me a lot of the Star Wars animated shows that they have, where they're kind of like blocky. And so I guess really the takeaway for this is, if you're really in the animation is cool, but god damn is the story in this, like, they had how many? Let me check. I swear to God it was 6. Yeah, so they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They had 8 screenwriters on this thing. I could have put a log line into an AI machine and generated a more interesting, like, emotional beat story than this. Like, there's nothing wrong with, like, the plot line that I gave you, but, like, the way it's executed is so, like, I almost halfway through was, like, offended, because it was so offensive to people who like story, like, just basic storytelling, that they did this. And they kind of segment it in a very video game fashion. So, like, you have, all right, so we have like 4 pieces of the stone that we got to get, so we're gonna, and it's in these 4 different places, and so we're gonna go to this place, and they have like a big title, and it's like, we're in this place, and then they, like, do the whole set piece, and then they're like, we got to get the next stone, and then it's like, boom, this place, and do the thing, boom. It's just very like it's almost like we're leveling, and they literally have like a concept of like leveling up, because every time they get a new stone and put it into the one that they already have, Sisu, the dragon, like, gains a new power. And so, to me, watching it, outside of the animation being fine and the story being honestly god awful, it was kind of interesting to me that it kind of had that video game component to it. And so I would be curious to see how that relates to the targeted audience of this, not me. Because you think that, like, the kids and younger people who are seeing this are probably pretty engaged in, like, video games and video game culture, whether they're watching, like, esports or Twitch, or just playing stuff like Fortnite or Call of Duty or things like that, where everything is very delineated in that way. You don't really have like a linear story. It's like you have kind of point beats that you have to quests that you have to complete, and so it's unfortunate that, like, the story was so boring. But also, to me, it's kind of fascinating, because I wonder if this is not in terms of the story being boring, but I wonder if this, like, the way that they segment it into being like these kind of, quest 1, quest 2, quest 3, completion goal type things. I wonder if that's going to become more of a way that, like, these types of movies are made, just because that relates to that audience more. I don't know. I didn't totally hate that. It kind of gets tiring after a while, because, at least in terms of how movies are structured, it kind of gets boring just going, all right, so we got, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. But in that respect, it was kind of interesting. So I don't know. I honestly kind of give or take this one. I'm much more pro the movie that Michael and I talked about a couple weeks ago, the new Pixar movie, Luca. I would recommend checking that one out if you haven't seen that. But I don't know. It was kind of that's mainly what I was left thinking about, is how the video game, how, like, I saw a tweet. This is the last thing I'll say. I saw this tweet recently where people were talking about, like, how we always think, like, the discussion is like how movies are influencing television, and how, like, those have similarities. And somebody was like, actually, what, like, that's a, like, stupid conversation to have anymore. Like, if anything, the conversation now should be, how are movies influencing video games, and vice versa, because I think that video games are such a prominent form of pop culture now, more than they've ever been before. And so I feel like those are probably going to start influencing movies in movies are going to be influencing video games and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Interesting. The characters in this are supposed to be like Southeast Asian, right?
Yes.
So was there any like cultural significance there? Like, did they try to do anything with that in the movie?
I guess, I mean, I think it's supposed to be kind of, paying homage to a lot of Southeast Asian mythology, in like that respect. I mean, I think for the most part, except for like, I think Alan Tudyk has like a role as like this roly-poly guy because he's like the new like John Ratzenberger for Disney Animation Studios, where they just like toss him in every movie for whatever reason. But the whole cast is Southeast Asian. And so, yeah, I don't know if there was any significance or if this is like based. I mean, I'm sure it's based off of probably a litany of myths. But I think that's kind of where its influence comes more, is that it's based off of this mythology that 8 people had to like decipher.
Yeah, it would just be nice if they would like make things that had more cultural significance. Because like I know like a lot of people when this movie was coming out, like a lot of Southeast Asians were like, oh yeah, like representation. But if you're gonna like, if the story doesn't really mean anything and it's not really doing anything with it, then what's the point? It's almost like just ticking a box where you're like, oh, I'm making these characters different, but I'm not really like doing anything with it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of what it's doing, because honestly, I like the idea of like the concept behind the story, like the way it was set up. It just the emotional beats in terms of like the motivation of Raya, the main character, is pretty obvious, but they have like this kind of subplot with the like, they kind of have like this in between villain where she's like, is she good, is she bad, with one of the other factions, and I don't know, like she's very underdeveloped. Like she's supposed to kind of have like this faux friendship thing going on with the main character, and then also kind of have like this difficult relationship with her mom, but it never like lets any of that develop. It just kind of like puts swords in her hands and makes her like fight. And so I don't know, it kind of, to me, it kind of like half-asses what you're describing. It kind of just goes like, oh, well, it's just like we're gonna like make an attempt at it, but not really actively like try to create something that's meaningful.
That's basically all the Disney stuff that has been coming out lately, where I'm like, I know what you're trying to do, but it's like not landing in any way. So,
and then you also kind of have like, I saw the trailer for the new Pixar movie, which is directed by the director of that Bao, the short film, the dumpling movie, that has like I think an Asian protagonist, and like the director's Asian, and like I think that like Pixar makes a little bit more of an attempt to like kind of do that, while Disney, like I said, you got like a white guy and another guy directing this, so I don't think with any relation to Southeast Asian culture. So,
well, thanks a lot, Disney.
And eight people, like I want people to watch it to see how bad the story is, and go 8 people, and then you go, oh well, 8 people wrote it. Of course it's terrible. It's a bunch of, you got like 8 people trying to make this thing. It's awful. So yeah, Raya and the Last Dragon. It's on Disney Plus. Emily, you're gonna take us home, and hopefully you're gonna describe a much more fun movie than I just described.
I thought it was pretty fun. I watched Snake Eyes, which is from 1998. I believe. Let me make sure. But it's a Brian De Palma movie, 1998, with Nicolas Cage as the, like, supposedly soul good cop in this Atlantic City area, and there's this boxing fight, and he is going to it, and he's in this building, but it's going to be turned into a casino soon. I don't know. There's a lot of like moving parts with it, but someone is assassinated, and so Nicolas Cage is trying to figure out who did it. And it's one of those action movies that ends up turning into camp, which is really fun to me, especially with Nicolas Cage. It's like moments that are not supposed to be funny, but they are very funny. But I think Brian De Palma does a good job of that. We replay the same moment, from different perspectives throughout the movie, which was pretty cool. It got a little old by the end, but it was an interesting way to tell the story. It's a fun movie to watch that isn't too serious.
It's interesting. We have a nice little bookend, I guess, of Nicolas Cage movies. But and Jessica, I'll be curious to kind of hear what he's like. You mentioned him a little bit, but what he's like in Pig, because the way you describe him in this movie, Emily, he kind of has that now where it's. I feel like there's some movies specifically that what was the Lovecraft movie, where it's kind of like they stick him in there, like, and it's more like he's not really a character other than just be like weirdo Nicolas Cage without like designing an actual character. And then you have something like Mandy, which also seems like very like geared to that. And so I'm curious, like, does he seem like, I guess my question is, does he seem like he's acting in Snake Eyes, or does he seem like he's kind of doing his I'm Nicolas Cage woo, like his bit?
Especially for the first 30 minutes, it's very I'm Nicolas Cage. He's like walking through the arena and like being boisterous and he knows everyone, so he's like really super silly. But I think there are definitely points towards the end that he kind of reverts into the typical like copy trope, which I normally associate with Nicolas Cage. So it was interesting, I guess, to see him in that way.
Yeah. Jessica, is he doing a Nicolas Cage bit, or is he actually acting in Pig?
Oh, he's actually acting, and I hadn't seen him do something like so somber in a really long time. Like, he is playing someone who is in a lot of pain, and just seems like he's like boiling underneath the surface, but not in a crazy way, in like a sad, like there's some bad shit that has happened to this guy kind of way. And it's really, like he does a great job, because he is not like, he's not dialing it up like at all. Like, he's like very toned down, very responsive to like the other characters in the film, and isn't trying to like be the spotlight like in any way, which is really interesting.
Nice. Well, because you watch stuff of his, and he's really good when he's acting. Raising Arizona, like he's fantastic. But then I feel like there's some stuff now where they literally cast him as like a Nicolas Cage caricature. Like, I know, what is it? I've heard that about like the Sion Sono movie that he's in, where it's just kind of like he's just doing a bit. So, well, Snake Eyes streaming anywhere, or where you can watch it?
I watched on HBO Max, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
It's Snake Eyes by De Palma. It's not the G.I. Joe movie.
No, which I didn't know was a thing until we talked about this.
honestly, like, they should put Nicolas Cage as the character in G.I. Joe. That would be kind of fun. It'd probably make it more interesting than that movie looks. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back talking It Happened One Night after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr. I'm here to let you know about a couple of things that Cinematary offers that you might not know about. First, if you're a fan of what Cinematary is doing, please consider joining us on Patreon. Remember when we weren't clamoring for your dollars? Well, now we're just clamoring for 5 of your dollars. So please help us and donate to our Patreon, and then you'll get exclusive content from our staff, including our Film Theory and Chill series, where a panel takes a piece of of theory each month and deconstructs it before diving into whatever topic is on their mind from the past week. The $5 each month is investment in the website and the podcast, and it goes solely to paying our writers for the reviews each week, so please consider doing it. It's only $5. If you missed an episode of Cinematary or a piece of writing we've had, you should consider signing up for our free newsletter. Each Sunday, we send out a note with the latest podcast episode, piece of Patreon content, and the last 2 reviews that we've written at cinematary.com. It's perfect for those of you who are interested in what's happening, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single Cinematary review. Finally, the easiest thing that you can do to help us is to please give us a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever else you're using to listen to the show. This helps us get more eyeballs and ears on the podcast and the website, and it helps the people know about Cinematary, which is really what we're here for. So to recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and give us a rating or review. We would really appreciate if you could do these things. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
Once I was happy, but now I'm forlorn, like an old coat that is tattered and torn, left in this wide world to weep and to mourn, betrayed by a maiden, her king. Oh, this maid that I loved, she was handsome, and I tried all I knew how to plead, but I never could please her 1/4 so well as the men and the flying trapeze. He floats through the air with the crazy speed, the daring young man on the flying trapeze. His actions are terrible, all dirty to see, and the love is purloined away.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 360 of Cinematary. In this part, we'll be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1934's It Happened One Night. Directed by Frank Capra from a script by Robert Riskin, the film stars Clark Gable, Claudette Colbert, and Walter Connolly. Spoiled heiress Ellie Andrews impetuously marries the scheming King Wesley, leading her tycoon father to spirit her away on his yacht. After jumping ship, Ellie falls in with cynical newspaper reporter Peter Warren, who offers to help her reunite with her new husband in exchange for an exclusive story. But during their travels, the reporter finds himself falling for the feisty young heiress. Classified as a pre-code production, the film was among the last romantic comedies created before the MPPDA began rigidly enforcing the 1930 Motion Picture Production Code in July of 1934. The working title for this film was Night Bus, which is the name of the short story the film is based on, and it was 2F starred Robert Montgomery, who is Frank Capra's original choice for the part of Peter Warren. Montgomery was replaced by Clark Gable, who was borrowed from MGM, while Claudette Colbert was borrowed from Paramount. In Capra's autobiography, he states that he variously sought Myrna Loy, Margaret Sullivan, Miriam Hopkins, and Constance Bennett for the role of Ellie Andrews before selecting Colbert. Harry Cohen suggested Colbert, who initially turned down the role. Her first film, For the Love of Mike, in 1927, had been directed by Capra and was such a disaster that she vowed never to make another film with him. Later, she agreed to the role only if her salary was doubled to $50,000 and if her scenes were completed in 4 weeks so that she could take a planned vacation. According to Hollywood legend, Gable was lent to Columbia Pictures, then considered a minor studio, as a punishment for refusing a role at his own studio. That tale has been partially refuted by more recent biographies. MGM did not have a project ready for Gable, and the studio was paying him his contracted salary of $2,000 per week, whether he worked or not. Louis B. Mayer sent him to Columbia for $2,500 per week, hence netting MGM $500 per week while he was gone. Capra, however, insisted that Gable was a reluctant participant in the film. Although he is uncredited on the film, Capra is given credit in many modern sources for co-authoring the scenario. In his autobiography, Capra credits his film Miles Connolly with suggesting that he rewrite the script to make the characters more sympathetic. Filming began in a tense atmosphere, as Gable and Colbert were dissatisfied with the quality of the script. However, Capra understood their dissatisfaction and let screenwriter Robert Riskin rewrite it. Colbert, however, continued her displeasure on the set. She also initially balked at pulling up her skirt to entice the passing driver to provide a ride, complaining that it was unladylike. Upon seeing the chorus girl who was brought in as her body double, an outraged Colbert told the director, quote, "Get her out of here. I'll do it. That's not my leg." Through the filming, Capra claimed Colbert, quote, "had many little tantrums motivated by her antipathy towards me. However, quote, she was wonderful in the part." In an interview filmed for the 1975 feature Bugs Bunny Superstar with Warner Brothers animation director Bob Clampett, he states that he based Bugs Bunny's characteristic carrot munching technique on the scene in It Happened One Night in which Gable chomps on a carrot. According to a New York Times article on how films can affect business, the scene in which Gable undresses and reveals that he is not wearing an undershirt adversely affected the sales of undershirts throughout the nation, but no other information has been located to confirm this. After filming was done, Colbert complained to her friend, quote, "I just finished the worst picture in the world." Columbia appeared to have low expectations for the film and did not mount much of an advertising campaign to promote it. It Happened One Night was the first film, in lieu to win Oscars in the 5 major categories: Best Picture, Direction, Screenplay, Actor, and Actress. And Colbert was the first French-born actress to receive that honor. The other 2 films that have done that are One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Silence of the Lambs. In 1934, the New York Times said there are few serious moments in It Happened One Night, a screen feast which awaits visitors to the Radio City, and if there is a welter of improbable incidents, these hectic doings serve to generate plenty of laughter. The pseudo-suspense is kept on the wing until a few seconds before the picture ends, but it is a foregone conclusion that the producers would never dare to have the characters acted by Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert separated when the curtain falls. And in 1934, Variety said, "The film proves 2 things. A clean story can be funnier than a dirty one, and the best way to do a bus story is to make them get out and walk." On that note, let's talk a little bit about It Happened One Night. Emily, I'm going to start with you as our resident old movies favorite old movies person. Where does It Happen One Night rank for you, and what's your what's your history with the film?
It's been one of my favorites for a while. I remember watching it. They played it underneath the Brooklyn Bridge in like 2019 summer, and hearing everyone else laugh at things that I have found so enjoyable about the movie was just like the coolest experience ever. So it's been one that I just love, and every time I watch it, I feel like I find something different to laugh at. And I just love the 2 actors are amazing.
Is this your favorite Capra movie?
That's tough. No, I feel like It's a Wonderful Life probably, just because I watched that way more, and I'm more of a Jimmy Stewart gal.
I mean, I get that. He's much more charming. Jessica, what do you make of It Happened One Night?
I really like it. This is my second time watching it. I feel like it is like the OG romantic comedy. It has some of like the most classic things that make romantic comedies good, and that is 2 people that kind of hate each other, but it's like the sexual tension is like very awesome to watch through the course of the movie, because you're like, well, will they or won't they? And there's like this push and pull, and these characters like do it so well, and it is like crazy to me to see a movie that is like this old that can communicate that the way that like a modern romantic comedy could, but it's because they borrowed it from them. And you see it a lot in romantic comedies now, but it's just not done as well. Like, it was almost like capturing like lightning in a bottle, which, like, from your description of them filming this, there was a lot of tension like on the set, and obviously there were people who didn't like each other very much, but it kind of fueled the movie a little bit, which is crazy, and it is the reason why they got like the chemistry that they did.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, like that they're kind of, you have these people where they're kind of like the sexual tension is kind of simmering under the surface. I mean, you have the whole, preface of this is pre-code. You know, the Hollywood production code is about to be like implemented, and so you also have like the fact that they're doing that is less like kind of like the beginning of a trope. I mean, it becomes kind of a trope, but like it's less the beginning of a trope and more we have to kind of like slide a lot of these like innuendos through, you know, so that we don't get dinged for the code, which I think kind of makes it much even more impressive, because a lot of that is just because they're trying to work around the constraints of making a movie in 1934.
Yeah, and he still gets to, like, slap her ass, which is great. Like, that is, like, one of my favorite scenes is, like, the piggyback scene, because they're just, like, having so much fun, and there are lots of parts in the movie where, like, Clark Gable is obviously a smooth talker, like, his character, Peter, everyone is kind of, like, hanging on his every word, like, he's very charming. And Ellie is she is a brat, essentially, and kind of a helpless baby, which he calls her at one point. And it's like the two of them really need each other in a weird way. But like, I think a question that would come to a lot of people's mind is like, he can be like pretty mean to her in the movie, right? Like, he tells her to shut up a lot. And also he
calls her a brat.
Yeah, he calls her a brat. And so it's like, yeah, I don't know. There are like lots of parts in this where I think I kind of keep going back and forth of like, are these guys good for each other, or are they kind of a disaster because of how mean they can be to each other? But it's this formula that you see a lot in romantic comedies where it's like in a movie narrative, this is cool and great, and at the end they end up together because of course that's how it's supposed to be. But then when you think of the aftermath, you're like, these people would murder each other, and actually this is extremely unhealthy. So I don't know, but besides that, I still enjoy the movie, and I try not to think about that too much, like, while I'm watching it.
I think the other thing, you know, like watching it now, and I like the movie a lot, but I mean, for y'all watching it in 2021, you know, you mentioned that like the way he acts toward her and he slaps her ass and things like that. Does anything like stick out at you that kind of, I don't want to just be like, you know, what's problematic in this movie, but like, is there anything like that in terms of like the behavior and how he acts toward her? I know just from reading like his Letterboxd review, Andrew talks a little bit about that and kind of how, you know, you have Clark Gable acting that way, but the way it kind of passes is that Claudette Colbert is never, you know, she's constantly like still in charge, like she kind of is able to handle him. And so what did you all make of kind of that dynamic and whether or not it kind of draws a line, or, you know, crosses a line?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is sadly like in old movies a lot. Especially, I feel like that is Clark Gable's persona in a lot of his movies, is he's gonna be an asshole to you, but like in a way that you're still attracted to him somehow. But I think that's really interesting, thinking about how he does always cut her down to size, but never to the point where she has no say. Like, she never backs down to those kinds of things. She always has something to reply back, which I think always makes it feel less mean and more like combative on both ends. But I mean, I know there's a line like she needs a man to hit her once every day, and or even if she doesn't deserve it or something like that, which now is like, oh yeah, obviously like super cringy. But yeah.
Yeah, and like in general, when you're watching a movie from the 1930s, you're like, being a woman in this situation is shitty no matter how you slice it. Like, her dad slaps her in the face, like, while, like, he's like, oh, just slaps her in the face, and then there's a scene, like, after that where she's like, well, Daddy, I love you. Like, like I would never hurt you. I would never do anything to hurt you. After he just like slapped her in the face casually.
There's also really like they're very close together, like
Oh
like
my
right in the
gosh,
movie,
yes.
and they're like talking really close. I'm like,
Yes.
what the heck is
That
going
was
on right
awful. I was like, who talks to their dad like that close? Oh, it was uncomfortable. But like in every situation, like whenever they're traveling, he is always the one that talks to people to arrange things. Like he is always talking to the innkeeper. He is always like talking to the person at the like the train conductor or the bus person. Like he's always doing all of the talking and arranging because he has to say that they're married or else she can't do whatever she wants to do. Like she can't just walk around and be a free woman. Like he's like, oh, I'm married to her, so don't, like, he tells the guy, like, oh, that's my wife, you can't talk to her like that, and then he's like immediately sorry for it. But like in any other situation, she just has no agency or power unless that she's married to this guy and he, like, she is his property, and so you shouldn't talk to her like that. And that is like something that is hard not to notice now when you're watching like an older movie. But it doesn't take away from the movie to me, because it's something that I think that you just have to accept when you're watching those films, or else you're never going to enjoy like an older movie.
Yeah. I think also compounds like her not having any agency is the fact that we're supposed to believe that she has no way of understanding the world the way it is because she's an heiress. Like she doesn't understand how to interact with everyday people. And so I think there is also an idea that she is above all of this, and so she has to have Clark Gable's character speak for her or whatever. But at the same time, I think she learns so much about like America, especially. I love that this was a Depression era movie where they're kind of moving through America and seeing, I think that's what Capra does so well, is like everyday people. Even if I know that not everyone in America is like this, I like believe it for during his movies with his characters and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, like the scene on the bus when they're like singing, like they have the band that's kind of there and they're like singing, it's such a wonderful scene where everybody's just like kind of, I like how you have the different people, you have the sailor and then the businessman like stand up and like do the different lines in the song. Frank
Capras actually sings a part in that, I guess, which I had never noticed until I was listening to.
Oh, is he the third guy?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. But like that's such a kind of like nice community scene. That was something I was thinking about also, is just like I've been doing a lot of travel like on airplanes recently, and you're just kind of like packed in there. But I can't even imagine like the type of travel that they're doing in this movie, where they're like on the bus and then you like get off the bus, you got 30 minutes and then you got to get back on the bus. And like there's so many scenes in different camps where you think of like the part where Claudette Colbert is going to take a shower, and she has that whole moment with the women in line there. I think to your point, like that he's able to kind of capture those little small, not even like moments of like Americana, but just like moments of like community that I think are kind of nice to see.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I mean, when you think about what other people would be seeing now, I don't know. No one was doing that like him. I feel like it was either very stylized period pieces a lot of the time, or about, not flappers, but like kind of the result of that in like the 30s in New York City, like Jean Harlow-esque kind of characters. And so seeing something very different from that and so well is like really resonating with people, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean the only others I can kind of think of is, I think Preston Sturges gets that a little bit in like Sullivan's Travels. Like he's able to capture like different communities outside of that, outside of just Los Angeles. And then I think think Ford does it a little bit. He kind of has like those moments with characters that are kind of off the star path, that where he kind of lets other people kind of have a moment that I think are interesting. But I think you're correct. Like Capra's really good at like allowing those kind of outside communities to kind of just have a moment where they're, like all of these, it's kind of more resonating in what they mean rather than like poking fun or like trying to make a point of it. Like there's never really like I'm trying to make a point about it. It's never something like that. Going back to kind of the whole like how this kind of becomes a precursor for romantic comedies, watching it now, do you feel like and this kind of ties into what we're talking about, but I mean, do you feel like this is something that I know that it was on Hulu for a little while, it's in the Criterion collection, but do you feel like this is something that could still play for on like Netflix, for the people who are on Netflix kind of engaging with more modern romantic comedies? Do you feel like this is something that modern audiences on Netflix could maybe respond to, even though it's from 1934?
I am optimistic with that because I love it, and also I was really surprised when I did see it with people who were coming to a free screening in the Brooklyn Bridge Park. Like, it was people of all ages that were laughing and enjoying it, and so I do think that it could reach those people if it is marketed in the right way. I think a lot of younger people maybe who are into Netflix romantic comedies might not give it a chance if it's presented in a classic kind of way. So I think it would be useful for people who love those kinds of movies.
What do you think, Jessica?
My mean answer is that sometimes I look at do you ever just look at the top 10 in the US thing on Netflix and it's garbage?
Yes,
like
that's true.
Some of it is the dumbest stuff that I've ever seen in my life. And like for me to imagine a world where in the top 10 would be like It Happened One Night. Like it's like Boss Baby 2 and then whatever that one dating show, Too Hot to Handle or whatever the fuck.
I thought you were going to describe the one where they were in like the costumes or whatever, the animal costume
I don't know.
things.
And then somewhere down the line It Happened One Night. That would be awesome. It'd be nice. It would be nice to imagine a world where that would happen. My nice answer is that I think that if you just sat people down in front of it, and they were people who were used to watching romantic comedies, that they would probably take to it. Because I think that the characters are like really easy to latch onto, and I think that immediately you understand what the movie is doing. It doesn't take very long for you to kind of get thrown into that and into the like tension that is happening between them. So I think that people would be receptive to it if they were just like sat down in front of it.
No, I agree with you because I think, like Emily was saying, like if you frame it in the way of like it's a classic movie, like it kind of, especially like a black and white classic movie, I think that kind of, I think the more general public would look at that and think that there's supposed to be, like this level of not necessarily pretension but like prestige to it, like they were like it was very important, and I think that's why I asked this, because I feel like this is one that could kind of pass through because it is very light and breezy. It's super funny. It's just kind of them tossing lines back at each other, like you were talking about, Jessica. It's a romantic comedy, but it's a very breezy movie, and I think that it kind of bucks that perception that like it's a black and white, it's won a bunch of Oscars, like it's this big, important, and prestigious movie, and it's like, no, it's a super breezy, very fun rom-com, and that's why I think, if people gave it a chance, it would be able to play, even though it's an older film.
And there, I mean, there's serious artistry to the level of like breeziness that is there. I think there's so much going on underneath the surface, but as you're watching it, you're not even thinking about that at all. And so I think that is something that people would overlook, not thinking that it would win Oscars, because it really was like a surprise to everyone that it did win all these Oscars too.
I was reading that that Claudette Colbert, so she has all this, like, this thing sucks even before, and then it gets nominated for all the Oscars, and she still is like, I'm not gonna win. And so she was like on a train, and so they had to like pull her off a train because they're like, you won the freaking Oscar, like you gotta come and like accept it. And so it was just interesting, like just how like dismissive they were, like to the bitter end about this movie, which is just kind of funny because it's funny also to that point, like it's such a breezy, fun movie that won all these Oscars. It's up against the only other movies that won, the five major categories is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Silence of the Lambs, which are like deeply serious movies. It also just shows you, like, it's nice that like a movie like this won the Best Picture and all the different Oscars, because like, again, going back to like the modern rom-coms, like can you see a modern comedy like that, like sweeping all five categories at the Oscars? Like, no, we gotta have like Gary Oldman dressed up as fucking Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just imagining, like, I'm trying to think of, I would give Pop Star, I would give that all the five major categories. I'd give Pop Star it. No, Jessica, you wouldn't give Pop Star all the...
I don't know. I've never seen it.
You've never seen Pop Star? Okay. We're going to do an episode on Pop Star now, and Jessica's going to be on it.
That's
just going to happen.
Young Critics Watch Old Movies future watch.
It's going to be young critics make Jessica watch Pop Star series, and it's just one week.
It's going to be young critics dressed as old critics watch young movies. So we're going to dress up as old people and then watch new movies.
And then Jessica's going to be like, back to you, Zach, and I'm going to be like, I have too much shit on.
I don't want to be around anymore.
When is...
I don't want to be...
when is this podcast just going to turn into I Think You Should Leave podcast, where that's all we talk about?
I'm trying to make it like, movies are dead, I Think You Should Leave is the future. The end. Speaking of Clark Gable a little bit, I mean, you mentioned that you enjoy him, but I guess what about him kind of makes him a nice... I'm trying to think of like a it doesn't even have to be a modern, like in the last few years, but I'm like trying to think of like a kind of relatively modern comparison for somebody like that. Unfortunately, like in terms of like just kind of shooting out lines and being an asshole and you're supposed to like him, the first person that kind of comes to mind is Ryan Reynolds, and that's kind of offensive to Clark Gable.
Yeah.
I guess, but I don't know. It doesn't play as well with Ryan Reynolds. I don't know. There's something tender about Clark Gable, that he keeps getting mixed up with women who are kind of like messed up, like rich women. Like, same thing with Gone with the Wind. Like, he keeps getting mixed up with heiresses, but there's like, he feels like he has to like put them in their place, but there's like also a tenderness where he's like vulnerable, and you can kind of see that in his face, and it's like a moment for you, the viewer, where you're like, wow, this guy's like really kind of sweet underneath. And I can't think of anyone, like, I can't think of a modern, like, actor who can do that so well, where it's, like, a vulnerability that is, like, underneath the performance. I don't know.
I feel like it needs to be someone who is a little bit tougher on the exterior, but it can be vulnerable at the same time. I don't know why I'm thinking of Michael Shannon, even though he's not really a romantic lead at all. But, like, to me, I feel like deep down, he's a big, huge softie. And I feel like that with Clark Gable, too.
I'm going to say Tim Robinson, again, bringing it back around.
Oh, my goodness.
He can play anything. I want him to remake some old movies. I think that would be so much fun.
I think you make a good point on Michael Shannon, though. I would like to see Michael Shannon like in a traditional rom-com. I feel like he could pull it off.
Yeah. Oh my god, he'd be so good.
I think he could do that.
He's hot in a weird way, and so is Clark Gable, I think.
He is, because, like, it's funny that, like, you know, that there was the whole allegation that, like, undershirts went at, you know, the sales went down because of that, because, like, that's such a, like, a weird, I mean, it's a striptease, such a weird striptease scene where he's just, like, sitting there describing himself taking off clothes. He's just like, I take my tie off.
I'm really gonna stew on this one. I feel like there has to be someone. I don't know why I'm thinking about, like, guys in westerns for some reason.
He has that aura, even though a lot of his earlier movies weren't really westerns. But yeah, I see that for sure.
Like Hugh Jackman, maybe. Like Wolverine Hugh Jackman, where he's, like, kind of mean because he's, like, trying to push people away because he's like, I can't die, so don't get close to me. But he's, like, sweet underneath.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Maybe I was gonna say Joaquin Phoenix, but he's not really, like, tough. He's more just he's more just kind of aloof.
Yeah.
Like stoic.
Yeah. But
maybe no one is like Clark Gable. We'll never have another one.
Yeah. I accept that. Did you guys know that his, like, grandson was the host of that cheater show?
You got a lot of scoops.
I know. Every time he introduced himself, he said his name was, like, something Gable, and then he'd look at the camera and he'd be like, "That's right, my grandfather is Clark Gable."
You would do that. I guess I would do that.
I'd probably do the same thing, yeah. I guess he's far up in my family tree, so, like, to the point where I don't know if it's okay that I'm like, oh, I think he's really dreamy, but far enough that I think it would be okay.
His name is Clark James Gable III. That's his grandson, and this is, I don't know if they can see my screen. That's what he looks like.
Not as nice as for the listeners. Not as
no.
He almost looks like he's like you hired a Clark Gable impersonator. Like if a weird kid had a birthday party, he was like, I want a Clark Gable impersonator. That's the guy who'd show up.
That'd be me, probably.
I'd like a Clark Gable and a Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda. I just want those impersonators at my birthday party. Any final thoughts on It Happened One Night before we wrap up?
I guess I was listening to the Unspooled episode, and it made me realize that they never kiss in this movie, which I would have, as I think about it, I never think that, because it just feels like the sexiest movie, like one of the sexiest movies ever. Super surprising. But it shows that, like, I think they can do so much without actually showing any sex. And I think that's why people were able to do it, even as the code restricted people further after this.
Yeah, it's kind of a talked about point now, but I mean, I think it is clever, the whole, like, the Walls of Jericho thing. Like, that's such a kind of, like, clever conceit that goes on throughout the film, and then, like, the payoff at the very end. It's good. Jessica, any final thoughts on It Happened One Night?
I would agree with Emily. I think less is more, for sure, when it comes to, like, the sensuality of this movie. I think that both of the actors do an amazing job. If you have never seen a Frank Capra movie, I think that you should watch this. I think it's a pretty good entry point. And also, if you just like romantic comedies and or Clark Gable, then this is perfect for you.
If you're ordering a Clark Gable impersonator or watching Cheaters, you should watch this. All right.
Don't end on that.
No, I go back to my point from before. Like, if don't treat this like it's like some super important, prestigious, classic black and white movie. Like, it's a super fun, very lighthearted movie. Watch it. Give it a chance. All right. Well, I'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematary if you would like to watch us live as we record. Thank you to our patrons: Cam, Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we're going to be back with a special guest. We're going to be talking about 1931's Madkin in Uniform, and we're going to be joined by film historian and filmmaker Jenny Olsen to talk a little bit about the German film. So it's a good chat. We've already recorded it, so I would highly recommend coming back next week if you want to listen to a nice chat on kind of like the history of queer cinema, because this one's a good one. So thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.